Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about presidentialism and semi-presidentialism. Now, in the last video on parliamentarism, I said that one of the major ways in which we could distinguish democracies was in how their legislative branches and their executive branches related to one another, right? And we said that under parliamentarism, that the executive branch dominates. Right? It's a little bit counterintuitive, right? The executive branch dominates under parliamentarism. But what about under presidentialism? Well, under presidentialism, you see more of a balance between the legislative branch and the executive branch. And there's a balance because the chief executive is frequently elected separately from the legislature by the population at large. So in a presidential system, the chief executive is usually going to be called the president, and he's usually going to be directly elected. And so each branch can claim legitimacy, and usually each branch has some legislative powers. Right? The president can do things without approval of the parliament, right, or Congress in the United States. So what ends up happening is that for policy to be implemented, in presidential systems, bargains have to be struck between the head of the majority party in Parliament. In the U.S., that would be the Speaker of the House, and the President. And once that bargain is struck, then something can happen. In the United States, for example, the President holds a veto over legislation, which means that, again, there's an incentive for the two parties to bargain so that legislation that's important doesn't get bogged down in a series of vetoes. Okay, what about the semi-presidential system? We said that in a parliamentary system, the executive dominates. In a presidential system, you have more balance between the legislative and the executive branches. In semi-presidential systems, which are a little bit more rare, executive powers are actually shared between the president and the prime minister. The president directly elected and the prime minister selected by the legislature. Two examples of semi-presidential systems are France and maybe Russia. These systems tend to behave like presidential systems when the president and prime minister are from different parties. Right? So if the population elects a prime minister from, say, the Socialist Party and a president from, say, the Conservative Party, then you have executive-legislative balance because, again, each branch needs the other in order to fully implement a political program. On the other hand, when the president and prime minister are from the same party, right, the system becomes a parliamentary system where the executive dominates or the president dominates. I'll give you an example. Right now, 2014, in France, the Socialist Party controls both the legislature and the presidency. Right? The president is François Hollande, and the socialists are in control of the legislature. What this does is this makes the president a powerful figure, because the president is both the leader of his party and the president. So in that case, all the executive and legislative powers are, at least in theory, led by him. Now, it turns out in practice, François Hollande, the French president, is in a lot of trouble. He's very unpopular. His leadership has been less than strong, and so, in point of fact, he's been a fairly weak president, but he's certainly stronger than he would be if he had to deal with a conservative majority in the parliament. And this is what happened when, in the 1990s, early 1990s, when François Mitterrand was president, he was a socialist, and Jacques Chirac, who would later become president, was prime minister. In that case, there was much more of a balance, and a lot more deal-making had to be struck. Usually in France, this is not true of every semi-presidential system, but usually in France, the president takes the lead in foreign policy and the prime minister takes the lead in domestic policy. Okay, so that's what you need to remember about presidential and presidential and semi-presidential system. In the presidential system, you have executive-legislative balance. In the semi-presidential system, the system behaves like a presidential system when the president and prime minister are from different parties, and the system behaves like a parliamentary system when the president and prime minister are from the same party.